When I opened the wedding invitation from Emily, the girl who used to call me Dad, I expected a bittersweet smile, maybe a tear or two. But at the bottom, in handwriting that pierced deeper than any knife, it read, "Please don't come. My mom doesn't want it to be awkward." I almost tore the card in half. Almost. But something about those words didn't sit right. It wasn't just the message. It was the way it was written. Cold, detached. That wasn't the Emily I knew. The Emily who used to scribble, "Love you, Daddy," on napkins when she was 5. The Emily who clung to my hand during her first school recital. The Emily I raised for 15 years. Not by blood, but by every definition that mattered. For 6 years, I stayed away. I respected boundaries. I swallowed silence. But this note, it felt like an erasure. Like someone was trying to rewrite history and scrub me out of her life completely. So I started digging. Not to cause trouble, but to understand. To find out if she really wanted me gone. Or if someone else wanted me invisible. What I uncovered next shattered everything I thought I knew, and set the stage for a confrontation that would make everyone at that wedding remember exactly who I was and why love isn't defined by DNA. Before I show you how a father erased by lies reclaimed his place, with one USB stick and a moment of truth, you might want to grab a tissue. This story doesn't end where you think it will. My name is John Miller, and I'm 62 years old. I spent the better part of 4 decades as a mechanical engineer, building things, fixing systems, solving problems. I liked order. I liked knowing that if you followed the blueprint, things worked. Pipes aligned, gears turned, pressure held. Simple, predictable. Life, however, is anything but. After my first wife passed away, cancer took her quickly. I spent 3 years in a fog of silence and routines. I'd go to work, come home, cook for one, sleep alone. I thought that was how the rest of my life would look. Quiet, numb, without color. Then I met Linda. Linda was everything my world lacked. Vibrant, sharp, a little chaotic. She was a widow, like me, but she didn't wear grief like a weight. She danced through it, challenged it. At first I admired her strength. Then I fell for her unpredictability. What I didn't expect was the little girl behind her legs the first time she invited me in for coffee. Her name was Emily, 3 years old, tangled curls, curious eyes. She looked up at me like I was a stranger from the moon. She didn't speak at first, just stared. But over time, she began handing me crayons, tugging at my sleeve when cartoons played, curling beside me when Linda stepped out of the room. She didn't have to say it. I knew she was testing me. Linda was cautious about letting me in, understandably. But as our relationship deepened, so did my bond with Emily. When Linda and I got married, I didn't just gain a wife. I became something closer to a father than I ever thought possible again. Emily didn't call me Dad at first. She called me Mr. John. But one day, when she had a fever and called out in the night, her voice cracked. "Daddy." It shattered me in the best way. From that moment, she was mine. Not legally, not by blood, but in every way that counts. I taught her how to ride a bike, helped her build model rockets, took her to every parent-teacher meeting. When she had a sore throat, I was the one sitting on the bathroom floor with a cold compress. I was there when she got her first A, her first heartbreak, and when she won her 5th grade spelling bee. Every Father's Day, she made me a card, drawings of us, stick-figured hand in hand. Linda seemed happy, or at least she pretended well. Over time, though, I noticed something shifting. There were moments, subtle, small, when she'd tense if Emily hugged me too long, or if I made a parenting decision without checking in. At first, I brushed it off as standard co-parenting tension, but it grew. Emily and I were close, too close maybe, for Linda's comfort. Sometimes she'd joke, "You two should just start your own little club." I laughed it off, not realizing then that the seed of resentment had already taken root. Still, I stayed steady. I didn't use the word stepdaughter, never called her Linda's girl. In my heart, Emily was simply my daughter. When Linda suggested we have a child together, I told her, "I already feel like we do." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Years passed. Life wasn't perfect, but we had something solid. Or so I believed. I gave Emily everything I could. Time, patience, wisdom, love. Not out of obligation, but because she made me feel alive again. After losing my wife, I thought my heart was a closed room. Emily kicked it wide open. I don't remember the exact moment Linda started pulling away. Maybe it was after Emily's high school graduation when she gave a speech thanking my dad, John, who taught me that being chosen is sometimes stronger than being born to. Linda didn't clap. Later that night, she said the speech was a bit much. I thought she was tired. Looking back now, I see the signs I didn't want to see. The dinners where Linda's smile froze when Emily asked for my advice. The way she began scheduling things without me. The sudden coolness in her touch. Still, I never imagined the fracture would grow so wide. I thought love was enough. I thought years of being there would outweigh biology. But life, as I've learned, doesn't always follow the blueprint. By the time Emily turned 7, she had stopped calling me Mr. John altogether. Her birthday cards now read, "To Daddy," scrawled in uneven letters decorated with stars, hearts, and smiley faces. I kept every single one in a small wooden box tucked inside my closet. The kind of box you only open when you need to remember that love once felt easy. She grew up into a kind, bright, slightly awkward teenager who somehow made being stubborn look endearing. When she was nervous, she'd chew the ends of her sleeves. When excited, she talked too fast and forgot to breathe. I knew her tells better than she knew herself. That kind of knowing doesn't come from biology. It comes from presence. From years of late-night homework sessions, scraped knees, science fair meltdowns, and post-breakup ice cream rituals. We were close. Closer, in some ways, than even I had realized. When Emily was 16 and caught her first real heartbreak, she came to me before she even told Linda. We sat in the car outside a diner while she sobbed over a boy named Derek who didn't think she was cool enough for his band. I listened. I didn't fix it. I just let her fall apart. And when she was done, I told her she was the coolest damn thing that kid would ever lose. She smiled through her tears and said, "Thanks, Dad. I needed to hear that." That night, Linda was unusually quiet. I remember thinking she might have been upset that Emily hadn't confided in her. I tried to reassure her, told her it wasn't a competition, that parenting is a team sport. But Linda only nodded and changed the subject. As Emily approached college age, her dreams grew bolder. She wanted to study architecture. The schools she liked were expensive, out of state, big-name programs that offered little aid. Linda was hesitant. I wasn't. I pulled from my retirement savings, set up a tuition plan, and told Emily, "Don't worry about the money, just build something beautiful." She got accepted into Cornell. When the letter came, she called me before anyone else. I still remember the shriek in her voice, the way she screamed, "Dad, I got in!" as if that moment somehow belonged to both of us. In many ways, it did. Moving her into her first apartment in Ithaca, I carried the boxes, fixed the leaky faucet, and made sure the Wi-Fi worked before I drove home alone. A week later, she sent me a thank you card that ended with, "Love you always, Dad, no matter how far I go." For a while, everything felt right. Emily thrived. We talked every Sunday. She'd call to ask how to make chili or which classes to drop, or just to vent about professors. I felt useful. I felt wanted. I felt like her father. Then slowly, the calls became texts. The texts became fewer. Responses delayed. I told myself she was just busy. College life, new friends, new world. But something was shifting. Back home, things with Linda began to unravel. We had gone through dry spells before, but this time felt different. She was distant, cold. She started staying out late, claiming she had joined a book club that met 3 times a week. When I asked questions, she accused me of being controlling. One night, I found a receipt in her coat pocket, 2 movie tickets, and a dinner bill for 2 at a restaurant we used to love. She hadn't gone with me. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She just shrugged. "You've been so wrapped up in being Emily's father, you forgot to be my husband," she said. That sentence split me clean down the middle. The divorce wasn't explosive. It was cold, sterile. We signed papers, divided assets, and moved on, at least on paper. Emotionally, I was wrecked. Not just because of Linda, but because of what I feared would come next, the loss of Emily. I tried to keep the connection alive. I sent Emily a long email explaining the divorce, assuring her that my love for her hadn't changed. I told her she could call anytime, that I didn't want her to feel caught in the middle. She replied with a short message. "I understand. I'm sorry this happened. Love you." But something in her tone felt distant. Over the next year, our communication waned. Every attempt to talk had to be routed through Linda. If I texted Emily, she rarely responded. If I called, it went to voicemail. Birthdays became quiet affairs. I'd send gifts with handwritten notes, unsure if they were even received. It was like watching a bridge collapse in slow motion, knowing it once held the weight of everything you loved, but powerless to stop it from falling. Emily's birthday was always a sacred day for me. No matter where she was or how busy life got, I never missed it. That first birthday after the divorce, I bought her a necklace, simple, silver, with a tiny compass pendant. The note I included said, "No matter where life takes you, may you always find your way. Love, Dad." I mailed it a week in advance, double-checked the tracking number, and waited. No response. A week passed, then 2. No call, no message, not even a text. I told myself she was busy. Maybe the package got lost. Maybe she was dealing with school or work stress. I gave her space. But deep down, something tightened. A month later, I called, straight to voicemail. I called again the next day. Same thing. On the 3rd attempt, Linda answered. Her voice was clipped, formal. "She's busy, John," she said. "She has a lot going on." I asked if Emily could call me when she had a chance. Linda sighed. "She'll reach out if she wants to." That phrase echoed in my head like a verdict. I switched to email. I kept it light, just checking in, asking how she was, reminding her I was always here. I attached an old photo of us from a camping trip, hoping to trigger a memory. No reply, not even a read receipt. Months turned into a year. I sent holiday cards, notes on her college milestones, updates on my life. Silence. Occasionally, I'd hear secondhand that she was doing well. through mutual acquaintances, old neighbors, but never from her. Then came the real blow. I received a formal letter from her university notifying me that I had been removed as the emergency contact on her student records. I hadn't even known she'd changed it. When I called the registrar's office, they told me the request came from Emily directly. I sat in my kitchen staring at the letter, wondering what I had done. I wasn't angry. I was numb. Like watching yourself bleed and not knowing where the wound is. About a year after the divorce, I ran into an old family friend, someone who still saw Linda from time to time. She mentioned in passing that Emily had a new job, a new apartment, a new life. She paused before adding, "She's been calling you Mr. Miller." I blinked. "What?" "That's how she refers to you now." I didn't want to say anything. I thought maybe you knew. I didn't. I couldn't process it at first. For 15 years, I was her dad. Now I was just a man with a last name. I went home that night and opened the wooden box where I kept her childhood cards. To Daddy. One read, in crayon and glitter, "You're my favorite person in the world." Another, "I love you more than ice cream." The handwriting changed over the years, but the message never did, until now. I remember staring at those cards, wondering if I had imagined it all. If love, once so solid, could really vanish without a trace. Then came the wedding invitation. It arrived in a pale pink envelope with gold trim. My name was typed on the label, Mr. John Miller. Not Dad, not even Uncle John, just sterile and formal. I opened it slowly, hands trembling. The invitation itself was elegant, understated. Emily and her fiancé, Jason, cordially invited me to their wedding. I stared at it, unsure how to feel. Was this an olive branch? A step toward reconnection? But then I saw the handwritten note at the bottom, scrawled in ink that looked rushed and uneven. "Please don't come. My mom doesn't want it to be awkward." That line hit harder than anything Linda ever said, harder than the divorce, harder than the silence. Not, "I don't want you there." Not, "It would mean a lot if you stayed away." No. It was cloaked in courtesy, but it screamed rejection. I held the card for a long time, the edges softening from the grip of my fingers. I thought about everything: bike rides, bedtime stories, science fairs, graduation hugs. I thought about every sacrifice, every time I showed up. And now, I was uninvited. Not from an event, but from her life. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table and poured a glass of whiskey. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The hurt ran deeper than tears. It was the kind of pain that just sits inside you, heavy, unmoving, like cement. All I could think was, how did I become a stranger to the girl who once called me Daddy? The wedding invitation stayed on my counter for days, untouched, but never ignored. I'd pass it each morning like a wound I couldn't stop brushing against. Each time I glanced at it, that single line would flare in my mind. "Please don't come." Not signed, not softened, just final. On the fourth day, I opened the closet and pulled out the wooden box. It had been years since I touched it. Dust coated the lid, but I knew every inch of that grain. Inside were memories no one could take from me. At least, not yet. I opened the lid, and there they were. Birthday cards, drawings, school crafts, a popsicle stick frame with a faded photo of us at the zoo, Emily on my shoulders, grinning, her face covered in chocolate ice cream. I picked up one of her old notes from when she was about 8. "Dear Daddy, you make the best pancakes and the worst jokes. I love you more than peanut butter." I chuckled. though the sound came out cracked. My finger traced the curve of the Y in Daddy. Back then, she dotted her eyes with little hearts. I laid out the letters chronologically, like forensic evidence of a vanished connection. Each one a timestamp, each one screaming love, innocence, certainty. And now she wanted me gone, erased. It didn't make sense. I grabbed my laptop and opened an old file folder labeled Emily Graduation. I hadn't watched the video in years. It was her high school commencement. She was valedictorian. I clicked play and leaned in as her voice filled the room again. I want to thank my mom, who never gave up on me, she said. And I especially want to thank my dad, John Miller, who taught me that family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when it counts. The applause in the video was loud. My own was silent. She had called me Dad publicly, not stepdad, not John. She chose me in front of hundreds of people. That speech wasn't a slip. It was a declaration. So how could the same girl who said those words now ask me not to come to her wedding? I rewound the video and listened again. Word for word, family isn't defined by blood. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, letting the injustice wrap around me like a second skin. It wasn't just rejection. It was revision. It was as if someone had edited me out of the story we'd written together and replaced me with a blank page. The notes, the video, the drawings, they were proof. Not of ownership, not of entitlement, but of love. Real, deep, hard-earned love. I began to wonder, what changed? I replayed every moment from the last few years. The decline hadn't been sudden. It was subtle, drip by drip, call by call. Missed birthday, shorter replies, one-word texts, no texts. But that wasn't Emily. That wasn't the girl who used to leave sticky notes on my dashboard that said, "Drive safe, Daddy." That wasn't the girl who once made me a world's okayest dad mug as a joke because I burned the toast. Something was off, deeply off. That night, I opened a drawer and pulled out a yellow legal pad. I began writing down memories. Just bullet points, fragments. First time she called me Dad, age 5, after the flu. Camping trip. Raccoon stole our food. We laughed for hours. The Derek breakup. Car cry. Diner fries. Cornell acceptance call. Graduation speech. I wanted to remind myself it had been real, that I wasn't clinging to some delusion, that I hadn't imagined the years we spent building something unbreakable. But if it had been real, why this? I looked again at the invitation. The note felt rushed, almost like an afterthought. The handwriting, sharper, tighter than hers used to be, not her usual loops. I pulled out an old Christmas card and compared them side by side. They didn't match. A flicker of something stirred in my gut. Doubt, yes, but also anger. Not the kind that burns wild, the kind that simmers, calculating. If she didn't write that note, who did? I picked up the envelope again. The return address was hers, or so it seemed, but who sealed it? Who mailed it? The silence between us suddenly felt less like distance and more like control. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Maybe I hadn't lost Emily. Maybe someone had taken her. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to bring her back. The next morning, I sat in front of my laptop, staring at the cursor blinking on a blank screen. My search bar still had "how to book a flight to Portland" typed in from the night before. The wedding was in 2 weeks. I knew the venue. It was printed neatly at the top of the invitation, some scenic vineyard just outside the city. I imagined the layout. White chairs, string lights, guests in summer linen, and I imagined myself standing off to the side, watching from a distance. I hovered over the confirm booking button. A round-trip flight, decent hotel, rental car. It would be easy. I could go, stay out of sight, maybe catch a glimpse of her walking down the aisle. Just to see her. Just to prove to myself that she still existed in the same world I did. Then I closed the tab. What was I doing? What would that accomplish? I wasn't invited. In fact, I was explicitly asked not to come. I told myself it would be selfish. That showing up would only make things worse. For her, for me, for everyone. I told myself I was being dramatic, holding on to something that clearly no longer wanted me. So I tried to be the adult, the bigger person, the ghost she asked me to be. Instead of going, I wrote a letter. Not an email. A real, handwritten letter. 4 pages long, on that heavy cream stationery she used to steal from my desk as a kid. I wrote slowly, carefully, choosing each word like it mattered. I didn't plead. I didn't accuse. I just told her what she meant to me, what those years had meant, that I respected her decision, even if I didn't understand it, and that no matter what, she would always have a part of me. I signed it, "Love always, Dad," and included a photo from her 5th grade science fair, the one where she built a volcano that exploded too early and covered us both in red-dyed baking soda. We were laughing in the photo, our arms around each other, her goggles still on. I mailed the letter the same day. And then I waited. A week passed, then 10 days. No reply, no call, nothing. I checked the tracking number. Delivered. Someone had received it. Whether it was Emily or not, I couldn't know. Maybe she read it and didn't care. Maybe she didn't even open it. Maybe Linda intercepted it. Every possibility was worse than the last. I tried emailing next. The address I had was an old one, still bookmarked in my contacts. I typed a brief message. "Hi, Em. Just wanted to check in. Hope the wedding plans are going well. I mailed you something. I hope you got it. Thinking of you always. Dad." I hit send. 3 minutes later, it bounced back. Recipient address not found. I stared at the screen, heart pounding in my ears. It felt like rejection on a mechanical level. Cold, impersonal, algorithmic, as if the system itself knew I no longer belonged in her life. The silence was no longer emotional. It was physical. It had weight. It pressed against my chest, wrapped around my ribs, sat at the back of my throat like a pill too big to swallow. I'd known grief. I'd buried a wife. But this was something else. Losing Emily wasn't like death. Death had finality, closure, ritual. This was like bleeding from a place no one could see. A wound that never stopped reopening. I stopped reaching out. There comes a point when even the strongest ropes fray. I told myself I was doing it for her, giving her space, honoring her boundaries. But deep down, I knew I was also protecting myself. You can only knock on a closed door so many times before you start to believe it's locked for good. So I settled into my new routine. Mornings with black coffee and silence. Afternoons working in the garage, tinkering with an old motorcycle I hadn't touched in years. Evenings with books I couldn't finish and dinners I didn't taste. I stopped checking the mailbox with anticipation. I stopped glancing at my phone every time it buzzed, but the ache remained. It wasn't sharp anymore. It dulled into something constant, like a bad back or an old scar. Manageable, but always there. One night, I stood in front of the mirror and said out loud, "Let her go." It was the first time I admitted it, not to anyone else, just to myself. I thought it might bring relief. It didn't. It felt like defeat. I crawled into bed that night and stared at the ceiling, wondering how it was possible to miss someone who was still alive, who might be laughing at that very moment, dancing, planning flowers, writing vows, and who, in all likelihood, hadn't thought of me in weeks. It had been nearly 2 weeks since I mailed the letter to Emily. 2 weeks of silence, of checking my inbox out of habit, only to find spam and bills. I told myself I'd let it go, that I was done reaching. But truth doesn't sit still, and sometimes all it takes is a single conversation to stir the dust you've tried to settle. I ran into Barry Jenkins at the hardware store one Saturday morning. Barry was a retired middle school teacher. He'd taught science for over 30 years, and Emily had been one of his favorite students. We hadn't seen each other since before the divorce. He spotted me near the paint aisle, squinted for a second, then smiled. "John? Damn, it's been ages." We caught up for a few minutes. Small talk, health updates, old man jokes. Then he mentioned Emily. "I was over at her new place a few weeks back. You know she bought a townhouse near the university," he said. My stomach tightened. "I didn't. We haven't really spoken in a while." He hesitated. "That's a shame. I saw a picture of you two on her mantle. Looked like it was from one of those science fairs. She still keeps it framed." I froze. "Wait, what?" "Yeah," Barry said, frowning. "You were in a goofy tie, holding up a model volcano or something." She smiled when she saw me looking at it, said, "That was a good day." I couldn't speak. My mind was racing too fast. She kept our photo. She smiled at it. I cleared my throat. "Barry, did she say anything else? About me?" He looked uncomfortable. "Not really. But it didn't seem like she was trying to erase you, if that's what you're thinking." My heart pounded. Barry had no idea what that meant to me. Not just the photo, but the look on her face. And that sentence, that was a good day. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't erasure. It was memory, fondness. So then, why the note? I went home and pulled the wedding invitation from the drawer. The note still chilled me. "Please don't come. My mom doesn't want it to be awkward." But now, I didn't just feel rejected. I felt suspicious. I opened my desk and dug through the old letters, the cards, the sticky notes from her childhood. Her penmanship had evolved, sure, but there were always consistencies. A looped Y, a slanted lowercase e. She dotted her I's low and to the left. The note on the wedding invite had none of that. The letters were sharp, upright, cold. It looked like someone trying to mimic formality, not familiarity. I pulled out a magnifying glass, not because I thought I was Sherlock Holmes, but because denial is a fragile thing. I lined up an old birthday card beside the note and studied them. It wasn't her. The more I stared, the more certain I became. The spacing, the pressure on the strokes, the style. It screamed someone else. Someone trying to make it look like Emily had written it. There was only one person who had the motive and the access to do that. Linda. I remembered how protective she was of Emily. Almost possessive, how she bristled every time Emily and I had a moment she wasn't part of. I'd always chalked it up to insecurity, maybe jealousy. But now, it looked like control. Had she intercepted my letter? Told Emily I never reached out? Had she written that note herself? Delivered it with Emily's invitation to keep me away? I couldn't ignore the possibility anymore. Not with what Barry said. Not with the note's handwriting. Not with the photo still sitting in Emily's new living room. I needed answers. But I couldn't go through Linda. That path was scorched and poisoned. So I thought of someone else. Emily's aunt, Linda's sister, Margaret. Margaret and I had always had a quiet respect for each other. She was the calm one in the family, the observer. She didn't take sides, didn't gossip, didn't play politics. When the divorce happened, she sent me a simple card, wishing you peace. I always appreciated how kind you were to Emily. If anyone would tell me the truth, it was her. I picked up the phone and called. Her number hadn't changed. Hello? Her voice came through warm and familiar. Margaret, it's John. A pause. Then, hi, John. It's been a while. I'm sorry to call out of the blue, I said, my voice tighter than I expected. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. She was silent for a beat. Go ahead. Did Emily really write that note on the wedding invitation? The one telling me not to come? A longer pause, then a sigh. No, John, she said softly. She didn't. No, John, Margaret said again, quieter this time. Emily didn't write that note. I sat down slowly, my knees giving just enough for the weight of that sentence to land fully. The room felt colder, smaller. Every breath had to be pulled in, like I'd forgotten how to do it naturally. I thought so, I whispered. But I needed to hear it. Margaret's voice was calm, but not without empathy. She doesn't even know you received an invitation. What? I blinked. What do you mean? She didn't handle the mailing, she explained. Linda took charge of everything. Guest list, addresses, RSVP cards. Emily just assumed everyone would get theirs. There was a pause. Linda told her you probably wouldn't come, that you hadn't spoken to her in years, that you were disengaged. A hot wave of disbelief surged up my neck. She told Emily I didn't care. I asked, barely recognizing the sound of my own voice. Yes, Margaret said. She told her you moved on, that you didn't want to be part of her life anymore. Emily cried about it more than once, but every time she tried to reach out, Linda told her not to. Said you'd asked not to be contacted. I couldn't breathe. She blocked your number on Emily's phone, Margaret continued, her voice turning bitter. She handled her emails for a while, said it was for wedding logistics, but I don't believe that anymore. She manipulated the entire situation. I felt like I was watching my own life from the outside, like someone had slipped into my skin and lived a twisted version of it without my consent. She faked that note, I said aloud, more to confirm it for myself than anything. Yes, Margaret said. I saw her handwriting on a card once and compared it. The slant, the pressure, it matched, not Emily's. I stood up and began pacing. So for the past year, Emily thought I abandoned her. I'm afraid so. And all my letters? My calls? She never saw them, Margaret confirmed. Linda intercepted everything. I stared at the wall, suddenly overcome with the image of Emily, young, hurt, confused, believing her father had stopped loving her, that I had turned my back on her, that the man who helped raise her, who cheered at her spelling bees and taught her to drive, had simply walked away. How could she do this? I asked, though I didn't expect an answer. Margaret sighed. Linda never liked how close you and Emily were. She used to call it unbalanced. Said you made her feel like the third wheel in her own family. I didn't agree, but she always needed to control the narrative. And when you divorced, she saw an opportunity to rewrite it. I felt sick, not just from anger, but from grief. Fresh, raw, deeper than before. Because now, it wasn't just about being excluded. It was about being erased, about a young woman growing into a life without her father because someone else decided she didn't need one. She has no idea I wrote her, I said. No, Margaret replied. She still talks about you sometimes, quietly, like someone remembering a dream. That broke me. I sat down again, my hands trembling slightly. What do I do? I asked. Margaret hesitated, then said, You tell her the truth, all of it, before it's too late. I nodded slowly, mind already racing. There was still time before the wedding. Still time to undo the damage. But it would take more than a phone call, more than a letter. I would need to show her, really show her, that she had been lied to, that the man who raised her never stopped being her father. I thought back to the graduation video, to the sticky notes, the science fair, the birthday cards, all the evidence of love that Linda couldn't touch. I still had them, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with them. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, my mind racing through every memory I had of Emily. From the day I met her, hiding behind Linda's legs, to the graduation speech that made my chest swell with pride. Now every single one of those memories felt weaponized, twisted by a narrative I hadn't agreed to, hadn't even known existed. It wasn't just grief anymore. That had come earlier. When the silence started, when the emails bounced, when the birthday gifts went unanswered. That was the pain of loss. What I felt now was something deeper, sharper. Anger, not the kind that lashes out, not reckless or loud. This was a colder rage, the kind that forms when you realize something sacred has been taken from you, something earned, something real. Linda hadn't just lied. She had stolen time. She had stolen the space between us and filled it with silence I never created. She'd built a wall between me and Emily, and then painted me as the one who walked away from it. And Emily? She was living in that version of the story, believing, day after day, that the man who raised her had decided she no longer mattered. I couldn't live with that. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliation or proving someone wrong. I didn't want to punish Linda. I wanted to correct the record. Because if I didn't, Emily might carry this version of me for the rest of her life. Absent, uncaring, gone. And that wasn't who I was. I opened the wooden box again, but this time not to grieve. This time to gather. I started sorting through the cards, the drawings, the photos. I pulled out every Father's Day letter, every school project with "to Dad" scribbled across the top. I found a thumb drive where I'd saved her 6th grade piano recital and another with a slideshow we made together for her college application. Piece by piece, I built the truth. Each item was a receipt, not of money, but of presence, of love, of proof. By the time the sun came up, my living room was covered in memories, like a courtroom exhibit, each one declaring he was there. He never left. I brewed coffee I wouldn't drink and sat down with a notebook. I began mapping out what I had, what I needed, what I could do. I wasn't a vindictive man. I never had been. But I was meticulous. Years of engineering had wired my brain to think in steps, to calculate variables, to plan ahead. And now I had a mission. I listed my assets, photos, videos, letters, physical proof of our relationship. Then I listed what I didn't have, access to her directly. That would change. She needed to hear from me, not filtered through Linda, not lost in someone else's inbox, but directly, clearly, truthfully. But I knew better than to just call or text now. That wouldn't cut through the noise. I needed something she couldn't ignore, Something that would stop her in her tracks and make her remember who I really was. And I had an idea. It came slowly, quietly, but when it arrived, I knew it was the right one. I would gather everything, organize it into a video, a timeline, a story, the real us, not edited, not manipulated, just the truth, told plainly, in her own handwriting, in her own voice, in our shared moments. This wasn't about confrontation. It was about clarity. Because love doesn't always fight with fists. It fights with memory. I looked around the room, now a battlefield of evidence, and whispered to myself, "You're going to know who your father really is, Em. No one gets to take that away from you." The next morning, I got to work. I cleared off the dining table and turned it into a war room. Folders, photo albums, thumb drives, envelopes, every corner of my life with Emily laid out like a blueprint. I didn't cry this time. There was no time for that now. Grief had its moment. What came next was truth. I started with the photos. There was one of us at her first dance recital, me in the front row with a bouquet too big for a 5-year-old. One from her 8th birthday, frosting on her nose as she blew out candles. Another, my favorite of us, sitting on the porch steps, barefoot, eating popsicles, her head resting against my shoulder. All time-stamped, all real. Then came the letters, cards, drawings, her tiny handwriting evolving over the years. To Daddy. Love you, Dad. Thanks for everything, John. But you'll always be my dad. I scanned every one of them. Emails were next. I had saved nearly every exchange. Her asking me how to unclog a drain in her first apartment. Me explaining compound interest for a class assignment. Her telling me she aced a midterm. Signing off with, "Couldn't have done it without you." I printed out tuition receipts, the Cornell payment plan, the transfer confirmations. Not for credit, but to show investment. Not in dollars, but in belief. The videos took the most time. I spent hours going through old camcorder tapes, hard drives, and cloud folders. I found her 5th grade spelling bee, the night we stayed up practicing, her high school graduation speech, her first day of college, both of us pretending not to cry. I loaded them into editing software, basic stuff. I wasn't aiming for slick. I was aiming for honest. I titled the project, The True Father. I organized it like a timeline, 15 years of being there. No commentary, no narration, just moments, back to back. Her laughter, her voice calling me Dad, her hand in mine, our shared life. At the end of the video, I added one slide. White text on black screen. I never stopped being your father. You were never forgotten. I hope you'll remember too. When it was done, I transferred it to a USB drive and printed a label with her name. I held it in my hand for a long time, feeling the weight of everything inside it, not just data, but history. I booked my flight the next day. One way, no hotel. I wasn't going as a guest. I wasn't going to sit in the crowd and clap politely. I wasn't there for the ceremony. I was going for her. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know if I'd get the chance to speak. I didn't even know if she'd look at me. But I knew I had to try. Because there's a moment in every life when silence is no longer honorable. When walking away stops being noble and starts being cowardice. I had stayed silent too long. I packed lightly, just a suit, the USB drive, and the photo of us at the science fair, the one Barry mentioned. I figured if I got kicked out, I'd still have the truth in my pocket. I also printed a letter, short, direct, in case I couldn't speak to her directly. Emily, I know what you've been told, but I hope this shows you what you need to know instead. I never left you. I was never gone. I've always been here. I always will be. Dad. I folded it into an envelope with a USB and placed it in my jacket pocket. As I zipped up the suitcase, I paused, staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't look like the man I was when she was 3, or 13, or even 20. The gray had spread. The lines deepened. But I still saw him, the man who danced with her in the kitchen, who read stories until his voice cracked, who stayed up waiting when she missed curfew. He hadn't left, and now he was coming back. The venue was a vineyard just outside Portland. Rows of green stretching into the distance, lanterns strung overhead, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. It was beautiful. The kind of place you'd choose for a fairy tale. The kind of place I never imagined seeing through the lens of a stranger. I arrived early, before most of the guests. I wasn't on the list, of course, but I'd come prepared. I approached the event coordinator at the entrance and handed her a sealed envelope. Emily's father, I said calmly. This is something she'll want before the reception starts. It's personal. She looked skeptical, but the word father must have carried weight. She nodded and took it inside. I didn't go in right away. I stayed near the edge of the vineyard, tucked behind a tree line, watching guests arrive in pastel dresses and tailored suits. I recognized a few faces, former neighbors, distant relatives. None noticed me. The ceremony itself was set under a large white arbor. I stayed out of sight, hearing the music, catching glimpses through the leaves. I didn't need to see the vows. I wasn't there for that. I waited until the reception. By the time the guests had moved into the tent, dusk had fallen. Candles flickered on tables. Waiters moved gracefully between courses. Laughter echoed through the fabric walls. I walked up slowly, heart steady, the USB in my coat pocket. Inside, the room buzzed with warmth and celebration. Emily sat at the head table beside her husband, Jason, I presumed. She looked radiant, older and yet still the same, her hair swept up, her dress simple and elegant. She laughed at something he whispered, and for a moment, I forgot why I was there, until I saw Linda. She sat 2 seats down, back straight, glass in hand. Her face stiffened the moment she spotted me. Her eyes narrowed, not in surprise, but in fear, like she knew what was coming. Good. I stayed near the edge of the room until the MC stepped onto the small stage and tapped the microphone. Before we move on to cake and dancing, he said, Emily and Jason wanted to open the floor to anyone who's played a meaningful role in their lives. To share a memory, a blessing, a few words. Silence followed. A few guests chuckled nervously. One woman stood, shared a short anecdote, then sat. Then the MC added, Anyone else? Someone who's helped shape the amazing woman Emily is today. That was my cue. I stepped forward. The room stilled. Conversations died. Forks paused midair. Emily turned slowly. Her eyes widened. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then Jason reached for her hand, grounding her. Linda stood halfway, her mouth opening. But I didn't look at her. I looked only at Emily. I walked to the MC, pulled the USB from my coat pocket, and whispered something in his ear. He blinked, uncertain, but I nodded. Ladies and gentlemen, he said cautiously, we'll now play something special. Please direct your attention to the screen. The projector flickered to life. At first, just black. Then a photo. Emily as a child, on my shoulders at the park. Both of us grinning. Ice cream dripping down her wrist. Then another. Her 8th birthday, Me lighting candles, her laughing mid-spin. Then video, her 5th grade piano recital, my voice off-camera whispering, "You've got this, kiddo." Her graduation speech, clear, proud. And to my dad, John Miller, who taught me that love is showing up every single time. Gasps rippled through the room. A few turned to Linda. She froze. The montage continued. Father's Day cards, birthday hugs, late-night study sessions, laughter, handwritten notes, her teenage voice saying, "Thanks, Dad," over and over in different clips. When it ended, the final slide appeared. "I never left you. You were never forgotten. I hope you'll remember too." Silence. Emily sat motionless, her hand now covering her mouth. Her eyes shimmered, full and still. Then she stood. Emily stood, hands trembling at her sides. Her eyes were locked on the screen, which had now gone dark, save for the faint glow of the projector, still humming softly. The room was silent, not awkwardly so, but reverently, like everyone present had just witnessed something too intimate to interrupt. She took a step forward, then another. Where did you get those?" Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. I didn't move. I couldn't. I simply met her gaze and said, "From our life." She blinked, lips parting slightly, as if trying to speak but not knowing how. Then her eyes welled up, and the tears spilled freely. She covered her mouth with one hand, the other gripping the edge of the table, as if to steady herself from the weight of the moment. More footage began to play. Unplanned. Perhaps cued by the MC. Perhaps divine timing. The screen lit up again, this time with a grainy video of a 5-year-old Emily riding her first bike down our suburban street, wobbling, then crashing softly into the grass. I ran to her, scooping her up before she could cry. "You okay, champ?" I said, brushing dirt from her knees. "Told you, you're braver than you think." Then came another clip. Older Emily now, maybe 12, sobbing in her room after her first heartbreak. I was sitting beside her on the floor, arm around her shoulders, just listening. "It's okay to be hurt," I told her, "but don't ever let someone make you feel less than you are. You are loved, deeply." The screen flickered again. Emily, in a cap and gown, crossing the graduation stage. She spotted me in the crowd and ran straight into my arms. In the video, she whispered something, inaudible. But I remembered what she said that day. "You always believed I'd make it, even when I didn't." The room began to shift. Guests turned to Emily, then to Linda, then back to me. And then came the final clip. Me, in a hospital bed, pale and weak, wires running to machines. Emily sat at my side, holding my hand, resting her forehead against mine. "Don't scare me like that again," she whispered in the video, voice tight. "You're the only dad I've ever had." When that clip ended, the screen faded to black and stayed that way. No one spoke. Emily looked at Linda, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes. "Mom," she said, but not accusing, curious, pleading. Linda didn't answer. Emily took a shaky breath. Did you write that note?" Linda stood frozen, hands clutched around her wine glass like a lifeline. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I was trying to protect you," she said finally. "From what?" Emily's voice sharpened. "From getting hurt again, from disappointment. He left, Emily. He disappeared after the divorce." I stepped forward, calm but firm. "No, I didn't. I called. I wrote. I showed up. You blocked me." Linda's face reddened. "Because you were confusing her. I needed her to have stability." "You needed control," I said. "And when you lost it, you erased me." crowd shifted again, murmurs beginning to rise. Emily shook her head slowly, backing away from her mother. All this time, I thought he left me. She turned back to me, eyes full of heartbreak and fury. Why didn't you fight harder? I thought you didn't want me anymore, I said, voice cracking. I thought the silence was your choice. I didn't want to push. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She stepped forward, 3 long strides, and wrapped her arms around me. Tight, shaking. I missed you so much, she whispered into my shoulder. I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought I lost you. No, I whispered back, barely able to speak. You never lost me. I was always here. Behind us, the guests stood awkwardly, unsure whether to clap or give space. But I didn't care. All I saw was my daughter in my arms again, the years of lies falling away like dust from a window pane. Emily pulled back and looked up at me, mascara smudged, eyes fierce. You're staying for the rest of the night. I wasn't invited, I said gently. Well, you are now. She looked back toward the crowd. This is my dad. If anyone has a problem with that, there's the door. No one moved. Linda sat down slowly, staring at her wine, suddenly very small in her expensive dress. And just like that, the room belonged to the truth again. Emily's embrace hadn't yet faded from my arms when she pulled away and turned back toward the crowd. Her eyes swept the room, now filled with stunned silence and flickers of disbelief. I need a minute, she whispered. She left the tent without another word, her dress brushing against chairs, her heels clacking softly against the wood floor. Jason stood halfway, unsure whether to follow, but she held up a hand as she disappeared beyond the exit flap into the night air. The reception tent buzzed in her absence. I stayed rooted in place. My hands still trembled. I hadn't planned for this. Any of this. I thought maybe she'd see the video, maybe cry, maybe say something quietly. I didn't expect her to explode the entire illusion in front of everyone. Linda sat in silence, her face pale and unreadable, staring straight ahead. Around her, murmurs started to rise, first in whispers, then in full sentences. Was that really him in the videos? He raised her? Why would Linda lie like that? I had no idea. Emily returned 5 minutes later. No one dared speak. She stood at the center of the room, back straight, eyes fierce but classy. When she opened her mouth, her voice rang louder than the music ever had. I owe you all the truth, she said, glancing around. Some of you know me well. Some of you have only known me since Jason and I got engaged. But what you saw tonight, that video, those moments, that was my childhood. She paused, looking toward Linda. I was told he left, that he didn't care, that he didn't reach out. And I believed it because, well, when you're grieving something, it's easier to believe it disappeared than to hope it's still waiting. She turned back to the guests. But I was wrong. She pointed toward me. That man is my father. He raised me. He taught me to swim, to drive, to stand up for myself. He paid for my college. He stayed up with me when I was sick. Every core memory I have, he's in it. Someone in the crowd clapped, then stopped, unsure if it was appropriate. Emily continued. I didn't write that note. I never asked him not to come. I never wanted him to be excluded. The truth is, I didn't know. I didn't know he'd tried to reach me. I didn't know he'd sent letters. That he kept calling, because someone made sure I didn't. She looked directly at Linda. My mother lied to me. For years. The tent was dead quiet. Linda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. A woman near the front, An older aunt of Jason's maybe, spoke up. "Why would you do that, Linda?" Another guest chimed in. "That was cruel." Someone else added, "You let her believe she was abandoned." The words piled on, soft but sharp, each one cutting deeper. Linda flinched. Then she stood stiffly. "I was trying to protect her." Emily stepped forward. "From what? From the only person who never stopped loving me?" Linda's mouth tightened. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw the fury behind her eyes. Burning, humiliated, exposed. But she didn't say another word. Instead, she picked up her purse and walked out. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. The guests murmured again, unsure what to do, what to say. But Emily stood tall, composed. "I'm not here to ruin a party," she said. "This is still my wedding. But I'm not going to live a lie anymore. The people who stay in my life will be the ones who respect the truth, even if it's inconvenient." She turned back to me and took my hand. "If you'll stay, I'd like you to sit with me. Not in the back, not as a guest, as my father." I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. That night, we sat together through the rest of the reception. We laughed. We cried. We danced. Clumsy and awkward, like we used to in the kitchen when she was little. She introduced me to Jason formally, again, this time as her dad. In the following days, everything shifted. Emily packed a bag and left her mother's house. She moved in with Jason early, citing emotional clarity as the reason. She sent me photos of her new space. Bright windows, plants everywhere, walls still bare. "Plenty of room for framed memories," she wrote. She blocked Linda's number temporarily, saying she needed time. And me? I received my first text from her in years without filters or third parties. "Dinner next week? Just you and me. We have a lot to catch up on, Dad." The fallout from the wedding came swiftly. Linda tried to call Emily the next day, 6 times. None were answered. Texts followed, full of justifications. I only did what I thought was best. "You don't understand what it was like raising you alone after the divorce. He's manipulating you." But Emily didn't respond. She didn't block her mother permanently. Emily never was the vengeful type, but she created distance. Real, unmistakable distance. She moved out of Linda's house the following week, leaving behind a note that said, "I need truth more than comfort right now. Please respect that." Linda's husband, David, took the news harder than anyone expected. The lie wasn't just to Emily, it had touched him too. He had believed the version of events Linda fed him. That John had been negligent, absent, uninterested. Now he knew better. He found the printed emails John had sent years ago, hidden in a file cabinet in Linda's home office. He confronted her. Voices rose. Something cracked. They separated within the month. It wasn't scandal. It wasn't explosive. It was something colder. Trust eroded beyond repair. As for me, I didn't rejoice. There was no triumph in someone else's collapse. I didn't need Linda's life to fall apart. I only needed mine to feel whole again. And for the first time in years, it did. Emily and I started slow. A phone call here, a shared photo there, then a lunch, then a walk through the park where we used to play. We didn't talk about the missing years much. When we did, it was brief, acknowledging the pain but not living in it. She asked questions. I answered them honestly. When I didn't know how to explain my silence, I simply said, "I never stopped waiting." And she believed me. A week after our second dinner, I found a card in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. The envelope was pink, her favorite color when she was little. I opened it slowly, heart thudding like a drum. Inside, just one sentence. Bo, nuboran, mai jen untoine. It was in English, of course. But those words, those quiet, casual, impossibly warm words, burned themselves into my chest like a brand. I stared at them for a long time. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't an apology or a proclamation. It was something better. It was normal. The kind of normal you don't realize you miss until it's gone. I held the card in both hands, my eyes blurring. I sat down at the kitchen table and let the tears come, not from pain this time, but from something gentler, something older, something like peace. The next night, I arrived at her apartment at 6:30 p.m. sharp, a bottle of wine in one hand and a homemade lasagna in the other, the same one she used to request every year for her birthday. She opened the door barefoot, hair in a messy bun, and grinned. "You remembered the lasagna?" "Always," I said, voice cracking. And that was it. No need for speeches, no need for revenge. Just a father and daughter sitting down for dinner, writing a new chapter. Not in ink, but in trust. The dishes were done, the wine glasses half full. The remnants of lasagna rested on the stovetop, covered in foil for tomorrow's leftovers. Outside, the city had gone quiet. Lights twinkling through the window, traffic reduced to a distant hum. Emily moved to the couch with a blanket and a cup of tea, but I stayed at the dining table. I wasn't quite ready to let the night end. My hand rested on the empty plate in front of me, but my mind was far from the room. It drifted back through time, across memories, stitched together by laughter, confusion, pain, and hope. She noticed. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded, just thinking. She waited, patient as always. I leaned back in my chair and sighed. I used to think being a father was about showing up in the big moments. School plays, graduations, paying for college, the milestones. Emily watched me, eyes soft. But that wasn't it, I continued. Not really. It's the small things. The way you listen when they're scared. The notes in lunchboxes. The late night drives to nowhere, just so they can cry. Being a dad isn't a title you get once and keep. It's something you choose every day. With every gesture, every silence you fill, every fear you calm. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I wasn't seeing a grown woman I had to win back. I was just seeing her. My little girl. The same one who once asked me if the moon followed our car home. I thought love was enough, I said. But sometimes, love needs courage. To stand up, to fight, to say, "No, you don't get to rewrite what we were." I wish I'd had that courage sooner. She came over, sat beside me, and took my hand. You showed up when it mattered most. That's what I'll remember. I smiled. Funny thing is, I used to think memories just happened, that they were these passive things we carried around, but I've learned they're made, deliberately, repeatedly, and they're fragile. She nodded slowly. Mom tried to overwrite them. Yes, I said, but she couldn't, because you kept that photo on your mantle, because some part of you knew. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I think I always missed you. I just didn't know what was missing. I didn't say anything. I just held her hand tighter. The night grew quieter. Eventually, she stood up to start tidying, but as she passed behind my chair, she paused. I felt her arms wrap around me from behind, warm and firm. Her chin rested briefly on my shoulder. "Welcome home, Dad," she whispered. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't dared to believe. I was home.